Now, lifeadministration.com presents the Life Administration Podcast. Here are your hosts, Leslie Loftus and Ryan Taylor.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 10, I can't believe it, of the Life Administration Podcast. I am Ryan Taylor, and with me, as always, is Leslie Loftus.
Hello.
How are you doing this beautiful, gorgeous Houston, Texas morning?
July. Actually, it is July, and when we woke up this morning, it was in the 70s, which is just unheard of. So,
the past 2 days
great.
have been
fabulous,
unbelievable.
Yeah, it's not even blistering. It's only like in the high 80s in the afternoon. I mean, it's just delightful.
You know, like you hear people talk about dry heat. You know, like, oh, it's a dry heat, whatever. It actually is a real thing. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Like 92.
You get in the shade in a dry heat. And it's actually cooler.
You
get in the shade in a wet heat and a humid heat.
Bad times.
Doesn't do anything.
Bad times. Yeah, no, it was fantastic. We got another one on tap today, so that's really nice. And today we are talking about modern etiquette.
Yes. Well, at least some part, because that's a really big chunk. But so we're going to mostly focus on communications kind of stuff.
Yep.
Because that seems to be where we're snagging.
Yeah. So we're gonna break it down into two different areas today. The first area is going to be sort of the written communication, right? Mm-hmm. And then the second area,
snail mail, all that stuff.
Yep. And then the second is going to be, and we're not going to cover everything, but we're going to cover a lot about verbal as well, just to kind of give people a foothold for when you're speaking. Here's the deal: when you communicate with somebody with care and presence and respect, you're more likely to just engage that person long term, right? So like if you think about first impressions especially, right? There's that old adage, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. If you can come across in a way that says like, this person's likable,
right?
That is so critical. And so for me, when I think of especially verbal communication, I think of like trying to come across as likable, but at the same time not sacrificing what you really need to say. Right? Like there is that sense sometimes of oh, I want to be polite, but I don't get my point across, or I'm actually not saying what I actually need to say. And so we're going to help kind of navigate those boundaries a little bit today. So super excited. But let's rewind.
Okay.
And let's talk about written communication. So where do you want to start there, Leslie? I mean, there's a bunch of different written communications.
Yes. Well, and this is one of those areas we talked about earlier in the shows about merging old and new. Okay. And this is communications in an area where kind of everybody's right and everybody's wrong. There are people that are like, oh my gosh, snail mail, written communication, that's phone calls, those are all dead. And another group that's like, oh my gosh, text is horrible, email is horrible, that's just completely useless. Everybody's wrong. Everybody's wrong. All of those things still have uses. But we are just now starting to sort out what is best for what type. And frankly, these rules of etiquette are communal rules. Communities and societies come up with them over time. One of the problems we've had with the technological age is things have moved so quickly that it's really hard for the rule-making mechanism. It moves slower.
Right.
And normally, or I guess historically, it was easier for the rules to form as the technology rolled out. For instance, cars or airplanes, they kind of rolled out very slowly. Only a few people used them at first, and then they expanded. So you were able to come up with different rules of how you use those things over time. We just didn't have the time to do that when we're talking about computer technology, things like email and stuff. It just went from 0 to 60 in about 5 years. And so there weren't a lot of norms that developed. So this is a heavy area for blending, when do we use what? Let's start with this one. Text is a very casual form of communication. And it's starting to creep into the workplace. And that's starting to bring a whole lot of mistakes going. Text is just not really good for professional communications.
I 100% agree.
Too easy to accidentally send the love letter to your significant other accidentally to your boss or your coworker, which can cause all sorts of problems, even when you're like, oh my gosh, or just yesterday, you and I, we have show notes that we collaborate on as we prepare each of these episodes. I sent it to the wrong Ryan.
That's true.
Yesterday, yeah.
That's true. Yep, that did happen.
That kind of, and that was email, and also it was, not nearly so personal. I'm like, sorry, you got our script. Text is a little too casual for the workplace. Then there's things like phone calls, especially when you have huge age differences here, where, say, people like my mom and the silent generation are... Everything's still a phone call. My goodness, it was only about a year ago that I finally got her on, Mom, I don't listen to voicemail. Voicemail is, in fact...
Your voicemail message legitimately says, don't leave me a voicemail.
Exactly. And that's partially because I'm Gen X and if I were a little bit younger, I wouldn't need to have that message because nobody uses voicemail, or uses voicemail very rarely, for those, except doctor's offices. Oh my goodness. The fly in this ointment, by the way, is doctor's offices. Bless them, they still use faxes.
And I have a dirty confession. I love leaving voicemails. I absolutely love
Nobody listens to them.
I know.
Nobody listens to them.
If it's not good, I hit 1 to re-record it. Like you know what I mean? Like
nobody knows.
Yeah,
nobody knows.
I know. It's so sad. Don't leave voicemails. Okay.
But yeah,
I think we're done here. No.
Yeah, but my mom, she's older, so I do remember when I was a kid, so I'm 8 or so years old. It was before, I can't even remember the name of voice or answering machines.
Oh yeah.
So if you called the doctor, you had to stay by the phone in the kitchen and for when the doctor called back, right? And when voice recordings came out, oh my gosh, that was just huge. Now you were free. Now you could actually run an errand. You could go up to the dry cleaners and get something ready. Yeah, exactly. You could leave the house when you were expecting a phone call. And so that became a huge, we used that for, 25 years. And now it's almost obsolete. There are very few circumstances when a voicemail is appropriate, and that's for doctor's offices.
Yeah, and I would say, when it comes to text messages, here's sort of my thought. Number one, I disliked it very much when my bosses texted me back in the day, and they did it quite often. And unfortunately, it was like a downhill kind of thing, because then I felt like I needed, this information it's a right now kind of thing, because I think...
Say demands on your time in just a second.
Yes, because I think there's sort of with a text message, there's sort of an unwritten rule that says, you need to sort of reply within a couple hours, we'll say.
Right.
An email, right, so that's very sort of now.
Which is why it's also much more conversational.
Right. So, also, but you find that people sometimes manage via text messages. And I'll tell you, that's the worst thing that you can possibly do. And so, if you pull back a little bit and you say, okay, let's say I need to talk to somebody about something that has any sort of conflict. It doesn't even matter what it is, right? Something that feels sort of uncomfortable, but you have to say something.
You need to get your roommate to pay up their rent.
Sure.
Something
that
like
one's hitting close to home right now, but that's
Sorry.
okay. Anyway, so what happens is that people see the worst in text messages, I believe, is that you take your own filter and you sort of put on and you read in a certain way.
And if you are not familiar enough with the person's way of talking, because once you have talked to somebody a lot face to face, which we'll get into the next segment, you know kind of what their vocal cadences are, you know what their sarcasm cues are. It's easier to read text from somebody that you know very well and to be more accurate about what they actually intended.
Yes.
If it's a more formal relationship, like in an office, it's really easy to read more negativity or more positivity or more certainty, or it's easy to read the extremes into a text, and that doesn't really work very well for professional environments.
No, absolutely not. So I would say when texting, that you still should use, if anything, more over than when you would speak, your pleases and your thank yous, and you really try to overtly set the tone of the message.
And I'm going to say that even belongs more in email, because
Agreed.
frankly,
Yep.
you should be using email for those kind of situations. And then yes, because email has the same textual limitations that if I'm not familiar with your actual voice very well, then so all of that stuff needs to go into email, because you don't really need to be doing texting with anybody that you're not very, very familiar, your best friend Sean over there, or me, who you've been working with for 5 years, and we have, music lesson stuff to discuss, your wife.
Yeah, and so I think outside of the professional environment, we'll get to that, I think, in a second, but people don't typically email like at all. So like my sister-in-law, right? She's always the one that I sort of think of. But I don't think she's written an email in like 5 years, unless it was for something.
I find that under about the 30 set.
Yep.
Like right now at our church, I'm managing all of our acolytes. And we still have an email system set up for them. I'm like, they're teenagers. The chances that they're checking email are zero.
Yep.
Yeah, maybe in the school year, because maybe some of their teachers email them, and so they're getting a little bit into the habit in a formal professional setting, in their education setting. Because, by the way, you young people that think that email is completely useless, it is very useful for education and profession. Okay, it's still going to be the primary way you communicate in those settings. But yeah, as far as casual conversation goes, and that's fine. Casual conversational stuff is texting.
Absolutely.
Professional and organizing things and everything, that's email.
So it's safe to say things that you should be texting are like, hey, how's it going? I missed you. Hope your day is going great. I just saw this thing.
Anybody want to go to the movies
It's
tonight?
like very one hit, bang, done, and move on. And I also have another rule. And Sean can attest to this. I think you can too. Is that if I text you more than 2 times in a row, I'm calling you, because at that point there is a diminishing of returns.
Yes.
Right. So it's like that. I text her, you text me back. I text her, text me back. Text her, text me back. Right. And then all of a sudden it's like I've been texting for 7 to 8 minutes when I could have called this individual and spoken to them for 30 seconds, and we could have gotten all of this nailed down, and I'm on to the next thing.
Yes, and I think that's one of the areas that's really, it's still a little mushy, jello jiggly. Figuring out exactly where text and calling, where's the line?
Right.
Where's the line?
And a lot of that, again, depends on the relationship that you have with the person, right? So you got to know, like, hey, this is someone I can call and talk to. So, okay. So moving on to email. Let's get a little bit more formal here. So now we're talking about emailing boss, older generation, those sort of things. So can you give us some framework around email a little bit?
At this point, email boxes are so inundated. First of all, let's get to the life administration. Really go through your inbox and put things, advertisements and stuff that you don't want in junk mail, block them, get the crap out of spend some time. And at the very beginning, let's say you're in your mid-30s and you've never really done this. Oh my gosh, it's going to be a massive undertaking. So say you're going to spend the next couple of Saturdays and you're just going to spend an hour and a half for the next 3 Saturdays, however long it takes. Put that on your to-do list, and then just spend a small amount of time and go through and junk mail them, block them, unsubscribe. There's a couple of services that Unroll is one that I have used in the past. Clean out the clutter. Because you get so many freaking emails.
Here's my quick tip. So Lauren had like 12,860 something emails that were unread. I mean, just exactly what you just said. Just never unsubscribed to anything in the history of the world. And so now...
And so she can't see anything.
Yeah, no. So like if you email her... it doesn't matter.
Buried in the junk.
Yeah, right. So it could be 13 emails down by the time that her inbox updates, and it's already down in the feed on your phone. So she's like, I didn't see it, right? So anyway, what we did was, a lot of those emails and stuff, they'll come at 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. And so a lot of people, when they wake up in the morning, is they go and they check their phone within the first 15 to 30 minutes of them waking up. And take 5 minutes every day and just unsubscribe from the emails that were sent to you overnight.
Absolutely.
I mean, it takes
That's another
zero
way.
time, and after
That's the one I personally use.
After the course of 2 to 3 weeks, you're really starting to see you're really starting to get through the clutter, and then you can go through and take 15, 20 minutes and really hammer home maybe the ones that you missed or something like that. That was a big tip for me.
But it at the beginning, it is going to be a time intensive process just to get rid of the junk mail. So then when you're on the other side and you're an email sender, be kind about sending emails. Be very, let's say, group email. Jump into that one. So somebody sends out a group email. Unless the entire group needs your response, don't use reply all. Nobody else needs the extra thing in their inbox. So who's coming to the party tonight? You only need to reply to the host.
Right. You're not as clever as you think you are. You maybe have something like clever and pithy to say and reply back to all. And you're like, this is going to make everybody laugh. No, it's not. It's just going to annoy people because their phone's going to be dinging maybe during a podcast or during a meeting or whatever. Like, oh my gosh, this person
it's just
again.
more stuff that gets buried and then somebody replies. So use reply all judiciously, because there's sometimes that it is important and you're having a group discussion. I'm frankly in quite a few group emails and discussion groups. That's different. But anyway, be kind about how much. Don't send 3 emails when one would do. Don't, when you're talking about bosses or people trying to manage things. Okay, so let's say you're managing some people under you at work. Send an email in the morning or in the afternoon. I mean, obviously this is going to be a bit project specific, but if you're just doing general monitoring and general checking in on how people are doing, don't hover over them and send one here and, well, how's that going now? Clutters their inbox, annoys people. There was one boss that one short story. Down in the Caribbean, so everything's on island time, and I'm trying to set up the phone service for the office. And so down there, it was not uncommon for the phone to ring 30 or 40 times before somebody picked it up, and then you could clearly hear them finishing their conversation in the background because I'm demanding on their time. We'll get back to that in a second. So my phone call was interrupting their discussion. So they just picked up the phone to stop it ringing and then are holding it like this while they continue with their discussion, and then it might be another 2 minutes or so before, yes, may I help you? On the other side, I have my boss, ringing in, because this is when you had to click over with call waiting. He's ringing in going, have you set it up yet? I'm like, get off my phone and I'll get it set up. I'll call you when it's finished. So same kind of thing with email. You don't need to send constant hovering email. You don't need to send constant, because here's the other thing. If I've given somebody a task to do, I don't need, I finished section A now, and let's say I want it by 4:00. I don't need a 30-minute update or an update every time you've finished a step. Clearly, I need an email if you've run into a problem or if it's going to be delayed, or, hey, I'm going to get this to you by 2:00. Do you need anything else? Okay, fine. That's great. But don't give me 2,000 updates when I've only asked for one. So be kind about other people's inboxes, because right now inboxes are completely inundated.
Something else I would say on this piece is, when I was in the corporate world, there is a tendency to over-bloat emails as well. And in the sense of, I think a lot of times... I am
guilty of that one. And as Ryan and I have said many times before, we speak from experience and mistakes on this one. Yes.
Yeah, so I
don't use 10 words when 5 will do.
Exactly. And I think really what the challenge is, and especially as a young professional, and I sort of recall back to being 22, 23, being in this role that maybe I didn't think that I deserved, or that I got lucky to get this job or something like that. And so now all of a sudden you feel like you have to prove something, right? And so when your boss... By the way,
that screams off the screen.
Right.
Screams.
Absolutely. But you don't know any better, right? And I think that a lot of people are going to go through this, and so I just feel compelled to say it. So you send this note to your boss, right? And it's 3 paragraphs long. And maybe he works remotely. Maybe his office is someplace else. And then you say, hey, did you get that email I sent? Oh, yeah, I didn't read it. I mean, literally, they would say to me, I didn't read it. Well, why didn't you read it? Well, it was 3 paragraphs.
Right.
if someone
and they open it up, they see the block of text, and nope, don't have time for this right now, and it gets skipped, which means then it's falling down lower in the you get.
And the reality is that you put so much time and so much effort in how you're trying to present yourself and say a certain thing and say it the right way that it's like, it's just not worth it. It's not worth it. Be concise, be confident, shoot it off, and move on, right? The other thing too is email, unless it's sort of like an expectation, like you said, hey, I have a project due at 4:00, email me when it's done. Email is the correspondence time is 1 day.
Yes.
Right. So like if you're in email and you're expecting a response within 2 hours, and it's like, well, then you didn't communicate the project effectively to start off with.
And let's go over these response times, because I think that's a big, huge part of the etiquette stuff. Because remember, when you are sending a text, sending an email, making a phone call to somebody, you are demanding of their time.
Yes.
You have no idea if they're currently in the bathroom, if they are, in the hospital,
driving.
are they driving? Right. Although now, thankfully...
You're the only person that uses that, by the way.
No, I think a lot of people, I'm hoping a lot of people turn off the notifications that say I'm driving and I'll call you when I get back. We'll get to auto replies in just a second. Yes, that's a thing. And because I don't like that it does the double auto reply. But it's a preset setting. I can't, or at least I haven't figured out how to change it. As a matter of fact, after this episode, I might go look and see if I can, because that's a very annoying thing. Anyway, you are demanding of somebody's time when you email them, text them, phone call them. And with text in particular, since it's supposed to be conversational, it feels like you're supposed to respond right away. So if it's your boss or texting, after 5:00 or something,
slap him.
Well, it's just part of the reason you don't want to use text in the workspace is because it's easier to set boundaries that way. Because and I do know there's totally professions where, no, you don't necessarily clock out right when you clock out. I was an admiralty attorney, had a pager because, as I used to say, ships collide about the same rate that babies are born, whatever in the hell they do it. So, you had to have the pager on at 4 a.m. So there are, doctors that have to be on. When they're on call, they have to be on. But if you send somebody a text, you're basically saying, I'm demanding that you reply to me within an hour. If you send somebody an email, I'm demanding that you reply to me within a day. If you phone call somebody, I'm demanding that you answer my phone call right now. And when phones first came out, that wasn't such a, you had shared phone lines. So, phones would be set up to call like a block, a neighborhood block, and then they would be like, oh, we're looking for Mrs. Smith. And Mrs. Smith is that one, and so everybody would tell Mrs. Smith to pick up, because lots of people would pick up. Actually, before my time, I'm not sure exactly how that worked. But anyhow, the point was you didn't have as many phone calls coming in, especially when you're dealing with long distance. It used to cost a lot. So there weren't as many. Now we have email and texting and phone calls and all of the messaging apps that come on with social media, Facebook. By the way, I recommend turning those off, because frankly, with the few people that leave voicemail, with the phone calls, with the email and the texting, that's enough forms of communication. You can spend most of your day just managing communications, and you don't have it, and you still have other places to check.
I have to say something.
Oh my gosh, it's just crazy.
Because my wife will literally murder me if I don't say this.
Okay.
Facebook Messenger is not an official means of communication.
Correct.
You cannot message someone on Facebook Messenger and expect the same sort of urgency that a text message gives you or a phone call. Like you just can't.
And that's why I recommend just cutting them out, because otherwise you have 20 forms of communication to check in a day. I'm exaggerating just a little. Because if you're a heavy social media user, you've got there's just you don't have enough time to check all of that. You got to streamline it.
So let's move on to snail mail. I think we got email pretty much covered. Okay.
But certainly everybody ask questions.
Yes.
Because I know there's more stuff in there.
So snail mail, we
Obviously
still
the
have
mailman
it. Yep,
brings
you're right. Okay. If If you don't know that term, well, you probably need a different podcast. Just straight up, shut us off. No, I'm just kidding. Play us in the background. So when do we still use regular old mail?
I kind of have a love-hate relationship with regular old mail. First of all, it has become rarer now, so now it's kind of the extra touch. So for instance, if you're sending invitations, if you're sending thank you notes, let's say you're a business and you're looking you're looking to do a promotion. Okay. Well, as long as you're doing a postcard, don't send a packet of information. If it says pre-sorted, auto pre-sorted, I've probably thrown it in the trash. But you have lovely penmanship, frankly, because I use paperless post for a lot of these things like thank you notes and everything else, partially because I don't want to subject anybody to my terrible penmanship. But there's still quite a bit where it's a nice touch to use it. There's tons of situations where you actually need to physically mail the check in, although frankly even the IRS now has auto pays. But every once in a while you run into some small service provider that only accepts checks. Obviously, you've still got paper mail coming in from Amazon packages and stuff like that. But I'm not going to say that it's boutique because there is still some. For instance, formal invitations. You're having a wedding. You're having a formal banquet for a fundraiser. Generally, those should be snail mail. I do know that there's a new trend for more casual weddings to go send out e-invitations, which. Again, I'm not exactly adverse to that because also you're killing dead trees. I mean, later on today we're going to record reduce, reuse, recycle, real environmentalism. When people are so wedded to mark for edit because the dogs are going to bark.
I think we'll just leave this one in here.
Okay. If she doesn't get much louder. Sorry, my husband and son are back, so the dogs are rowdier today. I have no idea who's at the door. You're going to be able to mark this out? Okay, good. All right, then we'll just... $27.20. We'll start over with boutique.
Okay, I think we're good.
Okay. Did we mark for it, or do I start over?
Yeah, you can start. Let's pick up at...
I don't think it's going to be boutique. That's easy for me to pick up there.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. I'm not going to say that snail mail is just boutique. Now there are a few instances, more formal weddings, more formal fundraiser events. Those need to be done in snail mail. Lots of people prefer it for... say Christmas cards, thank you notes. But at the same time, we're getting ready to have an episode on real environmentalism. It's reduce and reuse, then recycle. You're sending out an invitation to a very large party or gathering, or you're sending out your Christmas cards rather than e-Christmas cards. You're sending out real ones. Well, they just end up in the trash. I'm personally leaning more towards e-communications. That said, I like using services that don't have like a lot of advertisements that come with them. So one of the reasons that I use paperless post is because it's very clean. And I don't have, the big ad banner that comes along before somebody gets my thank you note.
I would say, and you wrote this.
But that's a little in flux still.
In the show notes. But there is a social currency that now is associated with writing a handwritten letter to someone.
Yes.
That when you take the time, and it doesn't have to be this long thing, but so I think of my meme, right? It's my grandmother. She's an old French woman, just like cute as a button. But she is a letter writer. So we don't talk every single week. My grandfather and I, we talked every single week, right? I would never write him a letter because that's just not how he operated. But she is like, we communicate, and she likes to get it in the mail. That's part of her routine. She loves when she goes and opens up the mailbox. I can hear the joy in her voice when she opens it up
Exactly.
and says like, oh my gosh, I'm so thankful that Ryan wrote me a letter. And it's just a couple, 2 paragraphs. I sent her some, maybe a couple collages that my daughter did. And here's a couple new pictures.
Loves
I love you, thinking about you. And I mean, and she's over the moon for it, you know? And so, if you sort of think of writing letters that way, of that this is a deposit in the emotional bank account of this person I'm writing the letter for, that's pretty powerful.
Right.
And so
Back to the love languages stuff we talked about in
Yeah.
the marriage thing. Knowing what, and especially since snail mail is now very personal. And some people really like it, and so by all means,
Yeah.
continue to. Stationery is gorgeous. I mean, if I had better penmanship, I would still be doing it probably.
Yeah. There's a place for it. There's still a place for it, right? So, so the crux of the conversation when it comes to communication in the written sense is that there is a place for everything.
Yes.
But know your audience, know what's appropriate, and then know the demands of time that you're putting on that individual when you're requesting communication to them. Okay.
And by far, one of the rudest things to do is do it in a round. So I texted you and I didn't get you, and then I emailed you and I didn't get you. And all of this is done like within, say, an hour. And then I phone call. Unless you're calling to tell me that my mother has been in a car accident, that's pretty much overkill. Or, you're calling because, all hell is breaking loose at work. There are times when you would chase somebody around, your house is on fire. But for the most part, calling and trying to get somebody in a round, if you don't have something real big and urgent to deal with, it's just rude.
Yeah. Okay, so we thought that this would be a shorter episode. Well, I didn't think that, but someone else at a microphone thought that. Anyway,
Ryan's instincts are generally better. Where are we, Sean?
We're at like the 32-minute mark, I think, right about now. Coming up on it. And big thumbs up. So we're in face-to-face communication.
Okay.
And we're gonna race through this. Yeah. Oh yeah.
I haven't even gotten to the second part yet. I'm like, we're fine.
Yeah.
Shoot.
So we're gonna race through this a little bit. If you have questions or concerns, definitely you can hit us on Twitter. We'll answer questions in a mailbag podcast, which I'm so excited to do. I can't wait to go through the mailbag. It's just gonna be so great. But I sort of ended the last part with know your audience, and I think it is even more important when it comes to face-to-face communication, right? So when you're dealing with somebody that you've never met before, making that first impression, coming off in a way that sounds genuine and sincere, and that you're actually interested in what they have to say, that is critical. So you want to make sure that you are speaking less and listening more.
Absolutely. The biggest things that you can do in face-to-face communication are listen, but then the physical actions before that, eye contact and a firm but not grippy handshake, these are huge. But the first one that people are going to do is how you actually present yourself.
Right.
Do you seem timid? And these are all visual cues that we have. And frankly, when you're talking about professional settings, sometimes you do need a little bit of practice. Get one of your best buddies to hang out with. Y'all practice handshaking, communications, all this kind of stuff, everyone. This is Ro coming to visit us. Practice that stuff a little bit with your siblings, whatever. But the other one is remember to listen.
Yeah.
Right. Don't have to fill all of the space with your own voice.
I've heard people say that 80% of communication is
No, I'm not going
non-verbal. I've heard that and that 20%. Okay, mark for edit. I can't. Okay.
Rosalia. No, come here. You need to lay down. Yeah, it's going to be that. I did say the dogs were squirrelier today.
That's 34 minutes about.
No.
Bro,
No.
come here, bro.
Go see Sean.
You hang out with me. Behind the camera is where we hang out. You're such a good dog.
Well, except when she's trying to get
even
Ryan to play with her.
Even then, you're a good dog. Oh? Oh, yeah? Oh. No.
Okay. I've heard it been said that 80% of communication is nonverbal, right? And so the way that you present yourself. Now, again, knowing your audience. So you want to, like you said, eye contact, practice. Listen, this sounds stupid, but you gotta look yourself in the mirror and you gotta start talking to yourself. You gotta look, like, understand how you're coming across. How are your shoulders? How is your eye contact? If you can't look at yourself in the mirror, how the heck are you gonna look at somebody else? Right?
Yes.
Yeah. Like, so that is a critical component.
And it does take practice.
It does.
It's not something. I mean, there are a few people that just have a real instinct for it, but stand in front of the mirror. Get one of your brothers or sisters. Get a friend.
Yep.
Just practice some of this stuff.
Practice. I would say another thing is how you, it's like how you present yourself. So also, like, how do you look, right? So, I mean, listen, I was a hiring manager and I would have people come in for interviews and I would make judgments upon them on how they looked because they just, right?
It's like having a typo in your resume.
Yeah,
right.
There you go.
It's like having a typo in your resume. And somebody that's very well put together, and it's not necessarily, they don't necessarily have to be fashionable unless they're applying for a fashionable job. All this. You need to be neat, put together in a way that is appropriate for the job that you're applying for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely, right. And because the hiring manager, there is this thing that you battle as a hiring manager called the halo effect and the devil effect. And essentially what happens is within the first 3 minutes, you've already made your decision about this individual, whether you're going to hire them or not.
Then there's tons of research on this. Yeah.
And you're
or at least you've made the decision like 80%.
Yeah, and you're actively trying usually to swing it the other way. Like, boy, this person came in, they're dressed so sharp, they had good eye contact.
What am I missing? Is that just a facade?
Yeah, and so you're trying to dig more, and that's a good place to be if you're on the other side of that. If they're trying to find, right? The flip side of that is if you've already made your judgment, you're thinking, man, I can't wait to go have my ham and cheese sandwich in 10 minutes. I got to get this guy out of here as fast as I possibly can. So that's
if you've shown up for a job other than say lifeguard or scuba director in flip flops, it's like, okay, you're not serious, right? And then I've got to be thinking, you've got to be saying something so outstanding that I'm going to overlook the fact that you didn't even care enough to wear real shoes.
And the reality is like it's hard to come back from that. Another thing is,
especially in this job environment,
is like understanding like social cues, right? I think a lot of time people just don't know how the flow of a conversation goes. And so in the sense of...
This also requires lots of practice.
So I'll give it... Last night, I was talking to this guy. I was helping him with his business. He's just asking me some questions. And I mean...
And for the audience, Ryan works with a lot of youth and 20-somethings and stuff.
So he's starting a computer repair business. And so, I was giving him some pointers on his website, talking to him about his business card. And Leslie, I'm telling you, for like 8 minutes, he rambled and rambled and rambled. And I only blocked off 15 minutes to do this because I got stuff going on, right? And I was just doing it for free. Hey, I want to help. I want to see you succeed, right?
Right.
And he just rambled and rambled, and we got really nothing accomplished. And he sent me a message saying, like, I really appreciated talking to you last night. And well, that's what you did, buddy. You talked to me all night long, and you didn't get any of my expertise or any of my knowledge because we ran out of time.
Right.
And so, again, like, understanding that flow of a conversation, you talk for maybe 15 or 20 seconds, and then you stop. Also, when you're speaking to someone, it's okay for there to be silence. A lot of times, like when you're talking to someone, you're asking questions, shut up.
One of my children in particular has that. It's like, no, it's okay to have silent dead time. It really is. And Jim and I are trying to train her up so that she knows that not every pause needs to be filled with conversation.
My favorite thing is that when you ask somebody a question, there is a canned response. I don't want to say candid, that typically people have been asked, certain questions a certain number of times, right? So, for example, how did you and your wife meet? Well, I got this story that I can tell, right? After that story's done, if they didn't say anything and they just kind of looked at me and kept nodding, I would tell them more. But that part of the story hasn't been practiced.
Right.
And that's like the more true, authentic thing that you're getting to. And oh, by the way, that's what's going to bring you closer. The object, as far as I'm concerned, of etiquette is, one, yes, to be cordial, but two, to build relationships with people, right? So in the last episode, we talked about, hey, your neighbor comes up, you're having a barbecue, and right, there is a skill set.
How do you connect with somebody without being creepy?
Yeah,
that's all of this stuff that's wrapped up in
a skill set, and that you have to practice it, and to not do that.
And I'm going to sound like a broken record here. Well, or not I'm not going to sound like a broken record, but I know listeners have heard this before. We don't have as much, the young don't have as much practice in that, partially because these are such fabulous devices. They haven't had to do as much face-to-face as we did growing up, and certainly as our parents did, because, heck, when I was a kid in the 70s, television for kids came on at 7 o'clock at night, and like 7 to 9 was when kids programming was. So there was nothing that kids were really interested in watching. You'd come home and there were some afternoon cartoons, and those would run until about 4. And then you have 3 hours where, so you were outside on the street playing because there wasn't other options. And it's amazing how much practice in this conversational stuff you got growing up that just doesn't exist as a matter of course anymore.
Yeah.
Which is why you need to do a little bit more mirror time. You need to get with your buddies and stuff and practice with each other.
I think I know we're gonna do a mini cast on how to practice verbal communication.
Oh,
I think actually showing it and seeing how ridiculous it looks, and knowing that it's okay, it should feel this ridiculous, and you need to just barrel through it would be important. So I'm going to write that down, because we are at the 40-something minute mark. We got a lot more episodes to do today.
Stink.
And I want to call it there. So Leslie, any final thoughts on this particular topic?
No, but I know that there will be a lot of questions on this one, because it's a huge topic, and we've really just scratched the surface of it. So please, I'm happy to answer questions, details, or things that you'd like to see in another minicast.
Yeah, and it's evolving too, right? I think the point that you said very early on was like, we haven't really figured it all out yet. And the reality is that there is going to be a new form of communication within the next 10 years that we have absolutely no handle on right now. It is moving so quickly.
One of the things we haven't talked about at all is, say, FaceTime or video calls. And those have their own... we didn't even cover that. And like one of the things, eye contact, so it's very important to make eye contact. And you think, oh, video call, I can make eye contact. Except any of us who have done lots of video calls know that the camera is up here, and your persons that you're communicating with, the eyes, you're not actually making any eye contact.
No.
So but we're starting to use FaceTime and video calls more and more. There's going to be rules that start circulating around that.
Yes. So let's wrap it up. Where can these folks find you if they have questions, concerns, or issues? Or just
mostly on the website, but I am also occasionally on Twitter at Leslie Loftus TX. But by the way, as we mentioned, don't do DMs or anything on any of the apps. Like, I rarely check Twitter DMs.
Yep.
Just not enough time.
Hit it with a mention. Yep.
Email me.
For me, Twitter is at Ryan Taillon, RyanTaillon. And with that, we thank everyone for listening. We thankful for you to sticking with us for this long. I obviously need to work on my verbal communication because I can't speak. I'm going to go to the mirror right now. Okay, have a good one, guys. We'll see you in the next one.